What's up, guys? We are live here with Pro Play Games with our top 8 purple Kaido deck. This is the starter deck Kaido and mono purple, obviously. And this is what we use to take down 30 plus locals, 30 person plus locals. And yeah, it's just really consistent. This is what I've been playing since limited deck battles. And obviously I got a lot of support from starter deck from OP1. So we're gonna see exactly what a up-to-date OP1 Kaido deck list kind of looks like. With that, before we get into it, if you like anything that you see in this video, any type of singles and such, you could always go to proplaygames.com. You can also buy all these cards on tcgplayer.com using the affiliate down below. It really helps support the channel if you use that before you start shopping. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Kaido, obviously, monocolor. That means we're going to start at 5 life instead of 4 life, like the dual color leaders, and that really helps as a control deck. Maybe not as relevant for like some of the aggro decks like Law in the format that needs to start at 4, that start at 4, but so let's kick it off with double Black Maria. So we're only playing 2 Black Maria because there's actually in OP01 there was just a better blocker that got introduced that essentially is the same thing, 2 cost blocker, but it actually has a 3k power. So the only reason why we're playing 2 Black Maria is because we actually want to even out our blocker count. We want to have an even 10 blockers. So this is the other blocker that I'm talking about. This comes in the OP01 set. It's just a common. So you'll need the Black Marias from the starter deck. But if you don't have the starter deck, not a big deal, kind of, I guess, because you can play this 2-drop, but you'll still need other cards from the starter deck. So definitely advise getting the starter deck if you can. But yeah, these 6 blockers encompass 6 of our 10 blockers that we want in the deck in order to kind of just like always be able to kind of pop out a blocker whenever we need to. There are going to be some matchups that these aren't as good in because, you know, like for example, Red, Luffy, like one of their cards say that your blockers can't block if they're a certain power or level. So obviously keep that in mind when you have those and prioritize kind of like based on the matchup. Next is going to be 4 Who's Who. I've liked this card at 4. Honestly, I've had no regrets. This from, if you hit this in life as well too, extremely powerful. Kind of like turns it feels like every time I hit this in life, it just turns the tide of battle in my favor because they don't really like play around it. And sometimes you just can't play around it, Early game, it's really easy to play around it, but there are times in the game where he just pops out and it goes from like you not having lethal to having lethal, or you pop something of critical importance. 3 or less is huge. 3 or less are huge in this format. So Who's Who being able to like take down Zoros and things like that is just like phenomenal. Next for the 3-drop slot is Sasaki. So Sasaki is the one that we're going to play over Jack. So we don't play Zack, we play Sasaki. Reason being is not really for the effect. The effect being oddly reminiscent of Jack, actually. Jack being an on-play, discard 1, ramp a Dawn, add an additional Dawn. This kind of does the same thing on play, but it's when attacking, actually. So you'll need to attach a Dawn, discard a card, and then add a Dawn rested. So there are going to be scenarios like early game where you don't see Island and you really need to get off to like a head start on Dawn, preferably, usually against like Red or some of the faster matchups where you really need to get that additional Dawn so that you can start using your minus Dawn powerful removal abilities without, actually setting yourself back too much. So Sasaki kind of does that. Most of the time he's going to get there and just like be a 2k combo because he is a 2k combo, which is part of the reason why we're using him over Jack. From the starter deck, but yeah, I mean, regardless, in either role that he kind of fills, I think that's just a phenomenal card. Most of the time being used, it's 2k. Next for the first 4-drop of the deck, we're playing 3 Basil Hawkins. So Basil Hawkins has an on-play, add a card from your Dawn deck, and rest it. Reason why this card is so good because it also has a trigger in the life, and that's why I like this purple build as opposed to like the other purple builds that you might see out there. It has a lot of chance for hitting these cards from the life, and when they come out of life, they usually really produce this surprise factor and this change in tempo that's really nice. But they're also cards that if you draw them, they're not necessarily bad. So this is one of those other like things that we use to leverage not drawing stage in the early stage of the game especially going second. So going second, you go to 2 Dawn, then you go to 4 on turn 2. You can just slap down a Basal Hawkins, and it feels really good, especially playing him on curve. He's also a body, despite him having a very low DP. He can kind of get in there and take down some Bonnies, take down some Namis. Like, it actually puts in some, some amount of work. So don't be afraid to slap some Dawn on him and just go to town, because sometimes that's just what he does, especially just instead of him just sitting around. Next for our 4-drop slot, this one's going to be more of a 2K combo, just like another one of our 5-drop slots here, but we don't use the Dawn on this at all because we don't have a page 1 target in our deck. We can be playing either vanilla page 1 beater 6K from starter deck, or we can be playing the 4-drop from OPO1 that is an activate main, can attack active creatures, but we chose to not go with any of those, mostly because we're just really playing this for defense. And starter deck meta, you would see commonly an ulti into page 1 play as like kind of like a tempo play. You don't see it as much here, especially because there's so much aggression. It's really hard to line up an ulti page 1 play without just trying to just stay alive, and not take unnecessary hits. So you can also just play this card. This is a 4K this is a 4-cost 5K, and sometimes that is fine. I did that against purple. Sometimes you just don't see early characters, and you need to get down a character so that you can have some type of like onboard removal or combat ability, and it's done that before, so that's also fine. Then we have 4 X-Drake. X-Drake, I actually play him a lot. I'm playing him almost like 40 to 50% of the time. I'm actually playing him from hand, and he's just discarding cards from my opponent, kind of like helping me out resource them. And this purple deck, because it really throws your opponent in a loop for a lot of control and things, it's actually super relevant to play and to combo with. So this card is phenomenal and really fills in this 5-drop slot really well. Next for the 5 drops, we're playing 4 Queen. 4 Queen. I mean, this is just an insane card, honestly. So this is really well statted at the 6K power. It can either defend the leader, which is pretty powerful if they don't boost anything into it, or you can use it as an aggressive tool. 6K is just extremely powerful. You just gotta attach 1 Dawn. You go to 7, which is really hard for your opponent to defend against, or like I mentioned, you can use it to block their lead, or you can use it to block their bigger attacks, because if they attack you, sometimes this will happen a lot. They'll try to attack you 7 into your lead, and then you go block Queen combo 2. So now it's kind of like you're blocking a leader swing with a 6K base instead of a 5K base, which a lot of people sometimes don't realize. So definitely a great card, and obviously getting rid of all your dead things, like getting rid of your extra islands, getting rid of your uncomboable cards is just super valuable. Also helps you dig for islands. Sometimes you just have to dig for island, so it does get you deeper, even though you have to Dawn -1, which is kind of bad. But there's a line where you go Basal and then into Queen, and then you draw island, and then you're okay and you stabilize. Speaking of Queen, we play the 6-cost version of Queen as well. We only play 1 of this one because it is a little bit higher costed. It has lower power, as you can see here, the 5 cost being a 6K and the 6 cost being a 5K, which is really odd and awkward, but rightfully so, because its ability is kind of good. On play, Dawn -1, it gives -2K to something, and then it gives itself rush. So this can effectively be a 7K into battle cards. So you want to see this as a ram into battle cards, like a battle card on battle card or character on character removal spell. It won't kill anything with the -2, because in this game it just doesn't die if it goes to 0. So it'll make their blockers 0, but it won't rid them, unfortunately. And like I said, the rush is nice out of nowhere. Your opponent can be at 1, you can play down this Queen, give it rush, -2K on something, then go Kaido, burn a life, and then you can just attack. You'll have leader attack in this for game. So there's some cute plays that you can kind of use to make this Queen above average, but regardless, it's just a 1 of, because it is only going to pop up on some games, and you don't want to clog yourself with it. Next for the 6-drop slots, we play Fukuroku Ju. He's really good. He's just for 6. AK is just it's just super powerful. As you can see, the queen is only 5k. The queen's only 5k at a 6 cost. This is an 8k at a 6 cost. Notably very good against Eustace Kids, the 8-drop in the green deck that walls up and kind of makes it almost impossible to take them down. So if you attach any amount of Dawn on this, it can take down some pretty significant threats, especially if you land this card before they do. It can kind of just act as like a pseudo removal spell, just by having, like I said, character on character removal is a lot of the times how you're gonna get to killing these cards that like King can't kill, or your Who's Who can't kill, or whatever. The main thing is that most of the time your smaller removal cards will kill the blockers, and then you just got to take down the big guys yourself with your own big guys. So that's become a really big focal point of making sure that purple can actually remove things on board. So definitely great to have. That's it for the 6-drop slot. Next for the 7-drop slot, we're only playing the OP01 King. We opted for this one instead of the 6-drop King, particularly because the 6-drop slot I felt like was better slotted for the AK vanilla, because that stat line was just really good, and it doesn't require minus Dawn. Like the 6-drop King, the problem is, sure, that 7k stat line is really nice, but you do have to minus Dawn to do anything, and you also don't want to cast it as a vanilla, because then at that point you're paying 6 for 7 when you could really just be paying 6 for an 8. So you rather just make that line, and then if you're gonna actually proc a king, the only king that is really worth procking is the 7-drop. The 7-drop 2 for 1's your opponent. It just gives you better card advantage. It gives you really good pressure at the 7k power, which is the reason why you play the other king for the most part. And currently in this meta, the 2 for 1 capability is really high, because a lot of the time they're keeping Blocker out, they're keeping like Bonnie out, they're keeping Zoros. Like this kills Zoros, this kills a 3 or less and a 2 or less. So like 90% of the time this card is live in pretty much almost every matchup. I think the only matchup that this card is like worse than the other king is probably in versus purple. Then we start scaling into some of our bigger bombs. Obviously, King starts that beginning of the bombs, but you have 9-drop Kaido here. So 9 is pretty heavy cost, but like we mentioned, this is kind of like a control deck, so you are playing towards the long game, and you need to be able to close out a game. And that's what Kaido kind of does. Well, at least this Kaido does. He kind of closes the game and puts a lot of added pressure on your opponent. You can use this guy in a few different ways. You can either use him as a removal spell and pressure your opponent's life, or you can use him as a double removal spell. So he's kind of reminiscent of the 7-drop King, because when he comes down, he does get rush. So by giving first he comes down, he kills something. He usually clear a blocker or something, and then you can use him to like beat over their kid or some type of other big threat that you want to get rid of. Maybe they're Luffy or something. So he kind of acts as a 2 for 1 in that way if you use it to clear battle cards, or you can kind of just use it to pressure your opponent's face. 10k is really nothing to scoff at, so it being able to just come down and immediately wreak havoc on the board is really good. But it's uncomboable. It's a 9-drop, which is why we're only really playing 2 copies. This deck also sees a lot of cards and goes late game, so you kind of pick and choose your poison here with the 10-drop Kaido as well. This one helps you clear the entire board, so if things kind of get out of hand, keep in mind that it does clear your board too. So sometimes it's really awkward, because surprisingly in purple, a lot of your guys sometimes stick. You end up playing queen after queen, and you have another king on board, so it becomes something that is sometimes detrimental or not relevant for you to kind of like blow up your own board for your opponents. So Kaido kind of just comes down and he can clear kids or anything like that might be important. Also, Kaido's at 12k, largest stat line pretty much in the game right now, so you can kind of take down pretty much anything. As soon as he comes down, it's pretty much a clock. It's about if your opponent has like many blockers to throw in front of him, and if they don't, they really are on the clock, because your leader can represent 1 damage at any point with the Dawn -7, And this 10-drop Kaido is always going to inflict 1 damage, along with the other Kaido. The other Kaido almost always inflicts 1 damage as well too. That rounds it out with all the characters. Next is going to be the events and the stages. So we got Onigashima Island, obviously 4-of. Like, this is pretty self-explanatory. In this deck, you typically want to mulligan until you find this card in your opening hand. Once you find it in the opening hand, then you're good. But this is a card that you really want to find, fish for, maybe take early life sometimes when you don't have it, just so that you can get on the board. It will help you stabilize. It will help you hedge against a lot of your costly effects, like the minus Dawn 1s, minus Dawn 2s, and things like that. So definitely something that you want to, highly prioritize in your opening hand. And then for the options, we only really play 6. Or the events, we play 4 Blast Breath. Obviously, like, you need this card in the deck. It's a 4K combo for 1, so every 1 Dawn that you typically keep up on your opponent's turn can potentially represent 4K counter, so that's extremely powerful. And you want to always really kind of hold on to these late game, so that you can make a big counter step if you need to. And it's always kind of like your emergency button in a lot of these scenarios. So Blast Breath definitely one of the MVPs. Also, the minus Dawn doesn't hurt you too much if you're doing it like very late stages of the game. And even if you're doing it early, Onigashima Island will help make sure that it doesn't sting too bad if you don't have too many. Then we have the 1-of Ultimortar. This card's whatever. I like it because it can technically, like, you can't overload too much on the events, because you need to be able to just consistently be able to apply some pressure. Like, Kaido's not just pure control, it's kind of like control mid-range, aggro sometimes, or it can just kill you from 3 to 0. So you don't want to get stuck with too many events, but this is definitely an event that I like a lot because it does help me when I have those like very defensive hands kind of draw into some of like the more aggressive cards, or help me find island, or a lot of these things. Also, there's, because it's a very big control deck, you do get to these late stages of the game where you start getting to like you start capping at 10 Dawn, and you really want to use that Dawn. You don't want to like just never add Dawn, and with the Dawn -2 here, it always guarantees that you're going to go back to that same number. So once you're at that sweet spot 10 and you go down to 8 and then you refresh that 2, it makes this cost almost non-existent. But obviously this card's terrible in the early game, which is why we're only playing 1. It's also very good as a trigger though in the early game. So in the early game, if you hit this off trigger, very good. You ramp ahead of your opponent, you kind of just like turbo up front. And if you see this late game, then it's a great combo card. Also, it draws you a card, like I mentioned, but the plus 2k on the card on average will be about 3k, right? Because you're using 1 cost to draw 2, and then typically that card that you're going to draw is a 1k combo on average. And then round it off, we have the 1-of Thunder Bagua. This is kind of like the same almost. It's a 4k combo though, so you can see this as like another Blast Breath. You want to see this as like a 5th Blast Breath, in asterisks, because it does cost 2 as opposed to the 1, which is good because a lot of the time your opponent will always see, like, if they see 2 Dawn up, they'll always expect like double Blast Breath, or if they see 2 up, they think maybe you're just bluffing, or maybe they think that you for sure have Blast Breath, and then you hit them with Thunder Bagua, which can be good if you have 2 or less life. It gives you the additional Dawn. So this is particularly good after you Kaido. So after you Kaido, and you're at low life, typically after you Kaido, you're going to be at 2 or less life because they'll counter with like attacking you a bunch of times. So if you were at 3 before the Kaido, typically you respond with putting you down to 2 or even 1, and then this card becomes live and gives you a lot more value because now you're ramping 3 technically on your next turn, or 4 technically, because this is going to bring 1 during your defensive step, then on your turn you're going to refresh, bring out 2 from your Dawn deck, and then if you have island out, you'll get a 4th one there tapped. If not, at least you're refreshing 3, which is something that your opponent might not play around, especially if you're going from 6 to 8, and they know that you can't 9-drop them. You play this, you automatically, you out of nowhere go to 9, and now they're kind of in trouble. Or you go to 10, and now they're out, in trouble. So yeah, this card's good. Also, trigger, adding a Dawn from your Dawn deck and using it. So both of these have that same exact trigger where you get that additional Dawn. you combo that with the Basal Hawkings that we play as well too, you pretty much have 5 ways of, you know, hitting something that ramps you ahead of your opponent. So that's pretty much it. That is the Kaido deck that we took to a top placing finish. And if you guys want to see more deck profiles like this, definitely leave a comment and subscribe. And until next time.